Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
I think, was that your back or the microphone? It's a long way for Mike to bend down to hug me. Oh, there, it feels better. It feels better. Ah. My name is Paul Williams. I'm a very grateful recovering alcoholic. I am your speaker boy tonight. I'm not going to wear my little ribbon because my ribbon is longer than my tie, and it's embarrassing. My sobriety date is March 15th, 1990. Come touch the hem. I just turned 20. I have waited so long for that Dos Equis chip. You know, it took me 17 years of thinking about it before I finally got here, because I started thinking about being 20 when I was about 3. Alcoholic? Maybe. Yeah. My home group is Lucky 13 in Sunset Beach. We meet right on the sand. The dolphins going by are our primary porpoises. We have a fabulous... That's enough of that. My sponsor's name is Mac M, and I'm living happily in 10, 11, and 12. I learned that nasty trick of talking about those elements of my life very gratefully at a meeting in New York. I think it was the Atlantic Group, and I went there and I went, that is very cool. You know, everybody in the meeting talks about what step they're working on, who their sponsor is, who their home group is, and it's I thought that's nice. It's because it's elements of my life. I am an alcoholic. And I'm also an addict, which is like saying you're from New York, New York, somebody once told me. You know, it's like... But I'm an addict, and because this is a meeting of AA, I'm going to try not to talk about drugs very often, but I'm going to have to mention them 2 or 3 times because they are a part of my spiritual awakening. First of all, they got me, cocaine was the express ticket that got me to my bottom. When I arrived here in 1989, I looked like a parrot, you know. You know. Hey, how you doing? How you doing? Yeah, gonna get sober, you know. Let me tell you about my life. I had my last drink September 21st, 1989. You'll notice that is not my sobriety date. My sobriety date is March 15th, 1990. What happened is on March 14th, I took a little pill. I took a Valium. It was a 5-grain Valium. It belonged to my girlfriend, which is practically like having it prescribed for me. I mean, 5 grain, one of those little blue things. If I dropped one of those, I wouldn't even pick it up in the old days, you know, but that cannot be enough to change your date, so I didn't change my date for about 3 years. And I called my sponsor. At a certain point, I realized that I was remembering the date, March 14th, 1990. Why am I remembering that date? Well, I'm remembering the Valium and everything. I realized finally at one point that I had not told my sponsor, and I talked to my sponsor, whose name was Jerry Hunter, passed away a couple years ago, 37 years sober when he died. I had talked to him about everything in my life, and I had not talked to him about that. I realized that, in fact, that it was a secret, and I know that I cannot manage my life and a secret at the same time. You taught me that, so I called Jerry Hunter, and I said, Jerry, I'm going to have to change my date. And he went, oh, my God. Oh, okay, why? I said, I took a Valium. He said, okay. A 5-grain Valium, little blue Valium, belonged to my girlfriend. He said, okay, when? I said, March 14th, 1990. And he thought for a minute. He said, well, there's a fabulous 10th step, you know, promptly admitted when we were wrong, you know. But the fact is, I bring that up because what I find many times, and I speak a lot. I'm asked to do this a lot, and I'm happy to do it. It's the most important element of my life is to share my recovery. We meet often so the newcomer can find us, you know, but I share that because a lot of times after I speak, somebody will come up to me and they'll say, you know what, I was kind of wrestling with it and I've decided to change my date, you know. So if you're somebody that's wrestling with that, I'll tell you it's the greatest thing I ever did. Greatest thing I ever did in my life. I'm a songwriter. In the 70s, I wrote some codependent anthems that were relatively successful. I wrote basically ouch mommy songs. Pick Me Up and Love Me, I'm Nothing Without You was my theme. You know, it continues to be my theme. But I have to tell you, I was horrifically blocked and could not write a word. I changed my date, and the bad songs began to pour out of me again. It was fabulous, you know. Great lesson in that. I want to say something before I start. I slipped and said my entire name. Actually, that's not a slip, because sometimes there's somebody sitting in the back of the room who thinks they recognize me, and for the entire meeting they go, "Where the hell do I know that little guy from?" And not hear a word I say about God and the program and Bill W. and Dr. Bob that changed my life, and what a fabulous life it is today. And they go, "Jesus, I just don't know, but I think we went to high school together, except I'm 83 and you're 12, you know." So I say my whole name. My name is Paul Williams. I do want to say this, and I want to speak not to you, but I want to speak to whoever's listening to this CD, because this CD is going to get out there, and my great fear is that someday some overly enthusiastic young reporter at the Denison, Iowa Guga is going to decide she's going to do the world a real favor by writing about Paul Williams and his recovery, which I invite them to do. Please, if you're listening to this and you're a reporter and you want to talk about recovery and how recovery works, I invite you to write about that. I ask only one thing of you: do not mention my name and the name Alcoholics Anonymous ever in the same sentence in print. I've been jabbering at meetings for 20 years, and it hasn't happened so far, and that's something I'm most proud of. And I'll tell you, a little person out there writing right now, there's a reason we do that. We have a tradition, and it's a tradition of anonymity at the level of press, radio, film, rock and roll video, and whatever, internet, blogging. We have a tradition of anonymity, and the reason for that is because if you print that Paul Williams is an Alcoholics Anonymous, and then I go out and get sloppy, throwing up, knee-walking drunk, people will be going, "Well, wait a minute. I thought he's in that there AA. That there AA must not work." I tell you that as long as I continue to do the things I've been taught to do in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, that will not happen. As long as I continue to do those things, that AA works just fine. End of announcement. Please don't mention AA. I feel better. I do this a lot. And I have your basic white bread alcohol. I'm just, it's a really boring drunkalog. I never came out of a blackout with a Russian arms dealer or, brothel in France with Norman Mailer and a couple of hookers. I come out of a blackout in the boys' department of Sears. Trying on sweaters. Like, get it off me. You know that a sweater pulled really tight when you're drunk enough looks like you're in a slave ship. It's amazing. But I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and if you get nothing else out of my pitch tonight, you've got to know that I love AA, that AA has given me a life that I could not have imagined ever. I was 49 years old when I got sober. I didn't have the best childhood, but I had the longest. And I don't know when I crossed the line from use to abuse to addiction to alcohol and other drugs, but I did. And I know that I acted like an alcoholic long before I drank like one. And I know that I was born into that place where a lot of us are with that. I wrote a song called A God-Shaped Hole. I have a God-shaped hole in the center of my chest, and that's the best way I can describe what it was like for me to be when I was a little boy, when I was born. And I was a big baby who just decided not to waste his time growing for about the first 14 years. I was like 20 inches long and 9.5 pounds or whatever. I looked like I was going to be a tackle. And then when I was 13 years old, I could run under coffee tables. It was embarrassing, Looked like a Muppet. People kept looking for the wind-up key, My dad was in construction. I was a construction brat, so we were always moving. We were moving to find the work. He worked for a company called Peter Kiewit and Sons Company out of Omaha, Nebraska, where I was born. And Dad drank. My dad was 6'2". I had two brothers, both alcoholics, both 6-footers. There's a mild resentment we're still working on 69 years later. But I'll get over it, I trust, eventually. But Dad was this great big guy who drank, and he was a sweetheart. He was a sweet man. He didn't want to fight anybody. He did argue. He argued he would have a couple drinks, and he and his buddies would sit down, and they would argue about politics, religion, and as he's put it, the goddamn job. And every night, he'd make statements when he'd sit down with a guy named Ike McShane, and they'd drink. And he'd make an announcement. We're not going to talk about politics, religion, or the job, because if we do, we're going to argue. And then they'd have a couple of drinks, and that's what he'd do. He'd argue until he got to the point where he cried. And then my dad was one of those big, sentimental guys who get real sweet and sentimental, and he decided that his son needed to sing for Ike McShane, usually around 3 in the morning. The last thing Ike McShane wanted at 3 o'clock in the morning was for some gnome to get up and sing Danny Boy to him, but... But I got up out of bed and I sang Danny Boy or I'm Yours, whatever, because it pleased my father. And you know what? It was the beginnings of, I suppose, of sort of a fantasy life and a grandiosity that maybe led me down the path of trying to be what I was trying to be. I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be a movie star. I looked so much like Haley Mills, I couldn't get a job, but I wanted to be, you know. But I was this little boy, and my dad would get me up, and I remember there's one story that I almost always tell from the podium at an AA meeting about my dad getting me up in the middle of the night when we lived in Lucasville, Ohio. Lucasville, Ohio is right where Kentucky and West Virginia and Ohio all come together. And my dad got me up. It was still dark out. It was raining horizontally. I mean, it was pouring, buckets of water. My dad got me up, and he said, you know, and he was just blitzed. He and Ike McShane. My dad had a 50 Mercury, and he put me in the back seat of that black 50 Mercury like James Dean drove in Rebel Without a Cause. My dad got in the front seat, and he looked back at me, and he said, you know what, my son? We're going to go see a professional baseball game. We're going to go see the Cleveland Indians play baseball. I say, the Cleveland? I mean, don't watch me, Dad. Watch the road, you know. I'm 69 years old. I was probably 12 years old then. I can close my eyes. I can close my eyes and I can see the headlights on the road. I can see the road moving from one side to the other. I remember thinking that it was my concentration that kept that car on the road. Welcome to the beginnings of grandiosity. To all of the Al-Anons in the room, I will tell you that you deserve a large apology from all of us who put you through the paces. And my dad, because it sticks it, you burn it into a forehead, you burn it into a heart, you burn that kind of fear into somebody's life, and it sticks with them, you know. But it's an interesting, I mean, a psychologist would have a ball with that, you know. I'm 11 years old, I'm in the back seat of that car, and I'm feeling like I have the power to hold the car on the road. Where does that come from? I think part of it is that's how we survive. That's how we survive. We think that we can manage things because to imagine what to imagine this absolutely out of control situation is too much for a little boy to imagine. And it's interesting because I've met some women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s who are exactly the same way, some men the same way to this day about the alcoholic that they're living with. I've got Al-Anon on the brain lately. I was just at the Big Island Bash in Hawaii. And while I was there, they showed When Love Is Not Enough, the Lois Wilson story. Did anybody here see it? It was the most, you know, I started crying in the middle of it. When they go through the steps at the end of that movie, I don't think I've cried that hard. And you know, I've heard people talk about the fact that when we grieve for something, you know, when we trust enough to grieve for something, it opens us up and we're allowed to grieve for lots of other things. You know, there's some sort of a connection that we have in this room. There's some sort of a connection that we have in this program that allows me to feel an intensity that, you know, and I love my family. I have two beautiful kids. I have an amazing wife. I'm married to a little Swedican, Swedish and Mexican. You never know which half is going to show up, so be very careful, you know. But I didn't think that I could love or be more attached or more emotionally vulnerable to anything more than my own family. But I am about Alcoholics Anonymous, and I am about our founders. And I watched that movie, and I just, you know, it stuns me. it absolutely stuns me to see this amazing beginning, and the fact that 5 years before I was born, these two men got together and created something that saved our lives, that absolutely saved our lives. My dad drove me through this incredible rainstorm, this horrific rainstorm, to see the Cleveland Indians play baseball. He drove to Cincinnati. Cleveland Indians don't play baseball in Cincinnati. He drove to the wrong city. It was a classic alcoholic moment, And we get there, and the parking lot is empty. And my dad's like, well, we got to be early. I don't know. We're going to get great seats, I'll tell you that, So we sit there, and they're passing the bottle back and forth. And then my dad gets up, and again, the memories that stick with you. My dad gets up, and he walks to the box office, and he was wearing brown suit pants, slippers, and what we now call a wife beater. He forgot to get dressed when he left the house, And he walked up to look at the ticket booth, and I saw what I called the alcoholic slump. That just, oh, crap. I did it again. That moment when you go, you have the best of intentions. You're going to do something. This is going to make it all up to her. This is terrific. This will fix it with her. And you get there, and you've screwed up again. And that's what I saw in my dad. I saw the shoulders come down. I saw the slump. And he came back to the car, and he said something that is the reason for this entire story. He walked back to the car, and he looked at me, and he said, kid, there's not going to be a baseball game today, but it's the thought that counts. And for this little alcoholic, some sort of a light went on, and I went, okay, I can do that. Yeah, a thought that counts. I could do that. And for 49 years, I was the thoughtiest little bastard you ever ran into, and the immense, generous things I thought about doing at 2 and 3 in the morning with the right combination of Stolichnaya and blow in my system. I was a river to my people, And somehow on the next morning, the thought went away and the action never happened. When I found the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, I heard something totally different from you. You told me that it was not about the thought. You told me it was not about the feelings. I remember Jerry. I said to Jerry, I feel so cut off, or I don't know. And, to like 11 o'clock at night or 7 in the morning, Jerry, I'll never feel I'm not getting in touch with my feelings. I want to have real feelings. He said, you stay sober long enough, Paulie, your feelings will get in touch with you. And he was right. What you taught me in Alcoholics Anonymous, because you are my tribe, you are my family, powwow, tribe, us. What you taught me is that it wasn't my thoughts or even my feelings. You told me it was about my actions. And I will tell you that for 20 years, my actions have been more honorable than ever before. You are an amazing group to teach anybody at any age. It's an amazing organization where you can sit down next to somebody who is 20 years old or 19, has got a couple years. If you're 50 or 60 and you're willing to listen to them, and you're a newcomer, you can learn from them. It's spectacular. You're my living second step. You are my living second step. Because I look at all of you, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Look at this. Can you imagine all of us the night before we got sober? Is this not an absolute miracle that there are this many people in one room? Forget about the world. There are this many people in one room that managed to get sober and stay sober. I mean, the night before, if we were out all there together, first of all, there would have been a fist fight. The cops would have been coming. I would have been hitting on your wife. That's guaranteed, Because also, with the right amount of Stolichnaya and blow in my system, I would go into the bars, a Shetland pony, and come out a Mustang. I would, Damn. I wish my dad had found Alcoholics Anonymous. I wish my dad could have had the life lessons at any age. My dad died at age 59 in a car wreck, a one-car car wreck, alcohol-related, of course, because he didn't do anything with that alcohol. And he died. He lived a week, and he died. And I was shipped off to live with an aunt and uncle in Long Beach, California. I have now returned to Long Beach. I live. My home group's in Sunset Beach, but I met a young lady who lived in Los Alamitos. I fell in love, and it's an amazing relationship. The two of us make one really healthy person, her, and so I went back to Long Beach after at age 60. It was amazing. But when I was 13 years old, I was shipped off to live with an aunt and uncle in Long Beach, and I went to Rogers Junior High School, I went to Wilson High School, where everybody, 13 years old, I was, like I said, the tiniest little creature in the world. And I also looked like I was about 7. I had a slow body clock. When I got out of high school, I was 4'6". I grew 8 inches after I got out of high school. I took a spurt. This is my version of a spurt. Sort of Reader's Digest spurt, But here I am, 13, 14 years old, going to high school with a tiny little guy, the whitest creature in the world. Everybody in Long Beach was tan, surfers. What color I got from the light in my refrigerator, Not a great outdoorsman until I discovered golf. And I have a couple of dear friends here that I play golf with, and now I can feel the melanomas popping. It's a fabulous sport, Play golf But anyway, so here I am, and everybody hit puberty at like 9 in California. I had the world's slowest body clock. And going in the showers in high school when you haven't hit puberty yet is like, that's worse punishment than, it's just going into the shower when your body looks like it's made out of cantaloupe. Leads you to your first prayer. My first prayer was, God, I don't care how big you make me, just cover me with fur, Be careful what you pray for. I'll tell you right now. Wait. Swear to God, I've got hair I don't need hair. I've got a little bit, like the side of my nose has an antenna that appears overnight. Boing, it's like, you can get coast to coast AM on it, Pluck that puppy before you go out, Paulie, So sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, what we pray for comes to us, But I was absolutely, I felt so separate from everybody, but I look back on it and realize I must have felt that I was so separate from everybody. I don't think I felt it at the time. I don't think we allow it. And when we're in the midst of that kind of separateness, which I don't think I experienced that connectedness until I got here. But looking back, I go, my God, you must have been so absolutely alone. But I didn't let myself feel things. I kept moving. I stayed in my head. I stayed in fantasy. And if you saw me at Wilson High School, you wanted to talk to me, you'd say, hey, Paulie, come here, Paulie, come here. And I would have tapped my watch like I had to be someplace. I didn't have to be anyplace. I didn't have to be anywhere. I just didn't know how to talk to you. But in my head, I'm fantasizing about being Robert Mitchum, because that's where it's safe. In my head, I'm off fantasizing about that. The only time I ever felt any sense of connection to anybody around me is when we went into either the back of a liquor store where a buddy worked and took liquor out the back, or one time we swam across the bay from a little public beach to some private boats at a dock, climbed up in there and stole booze. When we did those things together, when we drank together, I felt that connectedness. Let's get drunk, throw up, and be somebody. It was wonderful. I was one of the guys. I remember swimming across, maybe 1 o'clock in the morning. And here's another story that I tell a lot. I probably in the 11th grade, being on a public beach about 1 o'clock in the morning, midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, who knows. And I don't remember if I had a swimming suit on or if I was in my tidy-whitey underwear. I don't know. But we decided, somebody, I think me, decided that there was booze on those boats. So we swam across to climb up on the boats, the private yachts, and the like, Duffys and everything, steal some booze. So we did. And then I jumped in the water and tried to swim back. I found a treasure trove. I had unopened bottles of booze down my underwear or must have been my swimming suit. Because underwear, there wasn't enough happening there to keep it in. It would have gone right, would have gone right through in those days. But I jumped in the water and started swimming back with a full bottle of booze in one hand, full bottle of booze in the other, and a couple tucked in my and all of a sudden I'm underwater. You can't do that. You can't do that. And I shared that when in early sobriety. I shared that story, and somebody said, "You know what? That was a billboard from God." I said, "What do you mean?" They said, "Don't you see? You were like just 15, 16 years old, and alcohol was drowning you." I went, "Ooh, billboard." Didn't see it. Didn't see it. Loved the way it felt to drink. Didn't love the way alcohol made me feel until, and I don't know at what point I began to use it. But I graduated from high school. I tried to be an actor. That didn't work. And I began to write songs, and I built a really wonderful, wonderful life. Found a great lady and got married, had 2 amazing kids, and about the time that I had my kids, my success had gotten to a point where I was better at showing off than showing up. I was caught up in the grandiosity of it, and I had these blinders on for success in what I was trying to do, which was write songs. And at this little point right here, this 5 degrees, I did really well. But that left 360 degrees or 355 degrees. Hold on a second. How many degrees around the fourth? A lot. I left a lot of degrees left 355 degrees of absolute failure. Because I was a failure as a husband, I was a failure as a father. I sure as hell didn't do what I said I was going to do. I did everything. And the more I drank and the more I used, the more I fooled around, the further and further away I got from the gift that I was given to use and the people around me. And it all began to unwind and fall apart. I would never have made it here if it hadn't been for a 22-year-old psych major who I met and I left my wife and my kids for. I was 46 and she was 22. And I drank. My drinking was really like in 3. There were 3 kind of stages of my drinking. The first stage I didn't notice. I just drank. I drank because it's what we did when I was a kid. It's what my dad did. It's what everybody did. The second stage is when I drank, and I drank a lot, and I knew I was drinking a lot, but it was like, hey, wait a minute. I'm a writer. We drink. We writers. We drink, And I was in your face about it. And then the third stage is when I was lying about it, when I was saying I wasn't drinking when I was. And I still didn't think I was an alcoholic at that point. I met a 22-year-old psych major, and I moved in with her, and she had the courage to say to me, you know what? You're an alcoholic, and you're going to die, and I love you too much to watch that. So unless you get sober, I'm going to leave. And I said, oh, no, I'll change, So I went to a place called Schick Shadle for her. Some Shadle graduates here, and anybody here that did that? It's an amazing process. It's aversion therapy. And what they do is they give you an injection to make you very, very... I went to a place up in Santa Barbara, not far from where my ex-wife and kids were living. And they give you a shot, an injection to make you very, very ill. And then you go into a room has a chair with a bowl on it. You say, what's the bowl for? They say, you'll find out, And then you start drinking. Anything you want to drink, they will give you. Vodka, beer, everything. And all of a sudden, the shot they've given you takes effect, and you begin to get sick, and you begin to get sick. And it's just the most horrific process, because then they take a towel soaked in that stuff, wrap it around your neck, and put you in a room for 3 hours to think about it. Think about what alcohol is like. And how bad you feel. And then every other day they give you a shot of sodium pentothal, which is the truth serum, and they ask you if you want a drink. And if you say, yes, I'd like a drink, then you go back for more throwing up, But they said, we're very worried about you, Mr. Williams. I said, why is that? They said, you're always early for the sodium pentothal. Yeah, please. Bring it on, bring it on. I loved it. There was a great episode of The Honeymooners where Art Carney, they gave him sodium pentothal to take him back, and trying to find out why he was sleepwalking. So he said, that stuff's not going to work. They said, count backwards. Trust me, it'll work. So he counts backwards. 100, 99, 98, 3. And that's exactly where I love 3. I love it when I fall back into myself. I love when all this is gone, or I did at that point, because I didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know how to deal with this. I didn't know how to deal with life on life's terms. So I loved that disappearing act. But it worked. For 7 months, I stayed sober. Melissa, I shouldn't say her name was Melissa. You're not going to get the last name, even if you torture me. But she's the one who was there, and for 7 months, I had no program, I had no sponsor, I did no steps to work, I had no traditions to observe. But for 7 months, I did not have a drink, I did not have a toot, and I was just a joy to be around, I gotta tell you. Until I went to Jamaica on a project, and it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I had been up all night the night before trying to write a song. I'm sitting out by the pool in Jamaica. I'm sitting there. I'm looking at what I've written. I've been up all night half the night the night before, writing something that I thought was a rock and roll legend. Ba-do-da-do, I gave myself to you last night. And I look at it and I realize that day at 2 o'clock in the afternoon that I have rewritten O Little Town of Bethlehem.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
Do, I do myself, oh, little town of Bethlehem. No, Jesus. Excuse me. And at that magical moment, a guy in a white suit with a tray and sparkling glasses and booze comes along, and he says, "Excuse me, Mr. Williams, would you like something to drink? Perhaps a rum and coke?" And I went, bling. I haven't had a drink in 7 months. I am the Paul Williams. Great success. In my mind, I was a giant. So I can handle one rum and coke. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, in Ocho Rios, Jamaica, I had one rum and coke. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I was at Bob Marley's grave explaining reggae to a lot of black people I didn't know. Just off and running, just lying through my teeth. Yeah, I knew Marley. I didn't know Marley. I didn't know anything about Jamaica. I didn't know anything about reggae. Yes, the rock beat, the spiritualities of the bass line. No, I didn't know what the hell I was talking about, because there's some part of me that without a program, without a spiritual life, says in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. Without a spiritual life, there's some part of me that at a certain point will go to, I'm not enough. I'm just not enough. And my response to that when you put alcohol in me is, oh yeah, I am. I'm that and more. And I begin to lie. And I got to tell you that I came back, and this little girl that I was living with began to sense that I was lying. And to hide my medicine, I became a chronic and habitual liar. And I became dangerous to ride in the car with, and I turned into the kind of man that my father was, with my kids in the car, driving from Santa Barbara, where I had a home with them, that was now their mother's home, to my place in LA, 70-some miles. I couldn't make it from one to the other without a drink and a toot, with my little tiny kids in the car. Just exactly as my father did. And I'm driving along, and I've got to make them look away because I don't want them to know. I want to make them look away. So I'm saying things like, "Is that cow on fire?" Was a classic line that my daughter reminds me of today. She said, it's like, she's still thinking about burning cows every now and then. She goes, "Where the hell does that go?" "Oh yeah, Dad would do that in the car, Those wires are made out of real snake." "Oh really?" I have a sneak a drink, because I could not face fatherhood, or I could not face my kids. I could not face any aspect of life. I could not face any aspect of life without my friend, because I was just not enough. There was some part of me that was not, that I had no idea about how to be a man. I had no idea about how to be a man. So eventually she was gone, when people say, "Well, and then you got to get sober. The party was over." There was no party at that point. By then, my life was, me at, 3 o'clock in the morning, peeking out the Venetian blinds at the tree police because I knew they were out there. I hadn't misplaced a decade. The 90s were gone. You're an alcoholic when you misplace a decade. Thank you very much. And the 90s were gone for me. The success that I had built, the life that I had built, was long gone, and I had no idea, because I was still living in that place in my head that says, with the right drugs and alcohol and other drugs in my system, I'm a big shot. I'm a success. She was gone. She eventually left, and it just got worse. It just got worse. It just was a major habit. I was 50 pounds heavier when I got sober. I'm the only guy I ever met who got fat on cocaine. It's just because I remember coming out of a blackout. When I ran out of drugs, I would eat everything in the house. Remember coming out of a blackout, and I thought, I'm in a strange land with buildings that have no tops. They're sort of like pyramids, but they have no tops. Then I realized I had my face on the kitchen floor, and I was surrounded by yogurt boxes, like that, So here's what finally happened. I went to Oklahoma City to play a gig. It was an afternoon gig, and I was walking out of the hotel room in the middle of the afternoon. The promoter came and knocked on the door, picked me up to go and do the gig. And as I was walking in the hall of this hotel, talking to the promoter, feeling, and I'd probably been up maybe 2 days and nights at that point, been using, I think I was actually using and had been like taking a half dosage of Antabuse because I found I could drink with it and use cocaine if I kept the dosage down, or it's just weird combinations, no sleep. I had a full-blown psychotic episode. I mean, full-blown. I was thrown down escalator stairs by a monster that I could see that nobody else could see. I could feel my ears being twisted. And the promoter, God bless him, he looked at me like, oh my God, what have I done? I've got an audience waiting out there, and this little guy's turning into, Linda Blair, lick me, lick me. Yeah. So they canceled the gig until the next day. I actually did it the next day and told them that I'd had a reaction to my meds, which was true. I'd had a reaction to my meds because I had been self-medicating from about 1967 to 1949, But anyway, I went back to L.A., and for about 2 weeks I drank. I continued to drink and use. And then in a blackout, and it's a huge part of my story, it was not something I consciously did. In a blackout, I called a doctor and I said, I need to get sober. I cannot do this anymore. I don't want to be driving with my kids loaded in the car. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be outside the liquor store in Echo Park, close to the dealer's house at 6 a.m. I don't want to do this anymore. I cannot live my life like this. The guy called me the next day and said, I found a place for you. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, you called me yesterday and said you were sick and tired of being sick and tired, or my version of that. I hadn't heard that expression yet, but I said, what are you talking about? Somebody's been using my body here. What the hell is going on, And then I had that moment of clarity, and I started crying, and I went, yeah, let's do it. And I went to a place called New Beginnings in Beverly Hills. It's no longer there, and it's where I learned about the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's the greatest gift I've ever been given. Absolutely the greatest gift I've ever been given. There was a little guy who was a limo driver named Jerry Hunter, who had about 22 years at the time, or whatever, somewhere along in there. He had 37 years when he died, and I asked him if he'd be my temporary sponsor. He said, okay, and I remember right before he died, I said, shouldn't we change this from temporary sponsor? He said, oh no, you might screw it up. Let's leave it temporary. I mean, what an arrogant little bastard I was. Would you be my temporary sponsor, please, I was so blessed to have him in my life. And Jerry would call me in treatment, and he'd say, hi, and a little tiny guy. I mean, of course, I saw eye to eye with him. He was the same size as me. He looked like Yosemite Sam. He was fantastic. He was buddies with Serenity Sam and all these old-timers and all, and great stories. And whenever I was around him, I'd say, you notice? And he'd say, yeah, you've gone 12 minutes without talking. I went, yeah, on the what? Being really proud of myself for dummying up, But he'd call me up, and he'd say, how you treating the world today, Paulie? And the first time he did that, I had wait a minute, haven't you had a slip of the tongue? Momentito, don't you mean, how's the world treating me? He said, don't give a rat's ass how the world's treating you, Paulie. He said, but I promise you, he said, well, I do because I love you. But I promise you that if you monitor the way you treat the rest of the world, if you are spiritually vigilant about the way you treat the rest of the world, everything in your life will get better. And my God, no truer words have ever been spoken to me than those words. Because I turned my thinking around. And a big thing for me was in treatment, that moment when I came face to face with the possible, I didn't know the expression, I want what you've got. But I had that feeling, and how many of us have had that feeling where you go, everybody else, there's a book of instructions that they got that I didn't get. There was that feeling that I wasn't going to make it, and there was a possibility of that happening that scared me to death, and I started crying. And I grabbed a a piece of what I thought was blank paper to do my first step, and I prayed about my recovery for the first time. And I said, God, and I was angry. I mean, I was literally angry. There's something I haven't seen, and you have to show me, because those people seem to understand, and I don't. And I don't remember what I said. All I know is that I said, there's something I don't know, and you've got to show it to me. And I grabbed this piece of paper that I thought was blank, and I noticed when you hold it up to the light, there's something printed on the other side. And you turn over a piece of paper and your life changes, because I read for the first time in my life the words, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. There's a sentence here that says, now Jerry will make special announcements. And I keep thinking about Jerry, my sponsor, and I keep seeing his name here. It's really, really touching for some reason. Oh, because it's wonderful, because I got my life back. And when I saw that expression, bondage of self, I realized what I'd done. I'd taken myself prisoner. That how can you, if you're medicating, if you've developed a black belt in bullshit, and you will not turn to another human being and say, I don't know what I'm doing, you don't learn. You don't learn. All the success that I had, all that, it was almost, it wasn't an accident, but it was meaningless because I wasn't there for it. In many ways, it was meaningless to me. It means more to me now. It means more to me now because I can really give it away. I can go, I owe that to somebody else. Anything that was right in my life before I got sober, all the things that were right, I can give that away, give that to my higher power. The bondage of self, that inability to turn to another human being and say, help me, I've never done this before. How do you do that? To just be honest, to just turn to another, and that whole rigorous honesty thing was such an immediate relief. I mean, the first time I did it, I was like, oh my God, yeah. This is what being here amongst your family feels like. This is, and I would turn to absolute strangers at a party and go, you know what? I have no social skills. And they'd say, what? I go, I have no social skills. I'm not sure I can do this. And they go, well, you look like you're having a good time. And I do. And then I was. And then I was because I'd given it away. I'd given away the secret. I'd opened myself up and just, let people into who I was at that moment. And it was absolutely an amazing process for me to begin to do that work, to begin to do that work. And to find the most amazing people in the world and all. It says in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, the spiritual life is not a theory. We have to live it. So here's where I have to mention drugs in my story again. I remembered how I felt, because I wondered, how the hell am I going to get a spiritual life? Where do you go to buy one of those? I didn't know. Somebody told me, read Emmett Fox. Before there was a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, they read Emmett Fox, and I read Emmett Fox, and I found that was very empowering. And I got out of that and from my church today, which is just from me, not the big book, but I can say, I don't know how to do this, but something inside me does. And that something inside me is my connection to my higher power that allows me to trust in the moment. But I thought about how I felt when I scored cocaine. I mean, I'm on the phone, I'm out of drugs, and I'm falling apart, and I'm calling the dealer, and damn her because she's not home, and I'm calling her, and damn her she's not home, and she rings, and I call her one last time, and she answers, and she's there, and I feel better all of a sudden. And I say, she says, hi, and I can tell by the way she says hi that there's something going on. I said, anything happening? She goes, yeah. Want me to come over? And I go, yeah. And I feel pretty good all of a sudden, And I'm looking at myself, and I'm making a drink, and I'm putting ice in there with the Stolichnaya. I would have Stolichnaya in the shower in the morning. Stolichnaya was my roommate. And I'm putting a little ice in my glass, and I'm thinking, yeah, this is all right. And I'm looking at myself in the mirror, and I don't have any drugs yet, but I know it's coming. And I'm looking at myself in the mirror, and I'm going, you little stud muffin, you. You ought to be doing Guess Jeans ads, for the portly cadet, So she comes over, and I'm chopping this stuff up. I mean, it's like a ritual. My left hand did that for 6 months after I got sober. But I'm chopping this crap up, and I start using it, and nothing's there. And then I'm bunchy, and then I'm wired again, and I'm turning it into that parrot one more time. And I've got a really important business appointment at 4 o'clock. And what time is it? 6:45. Jesus, you know. So I'll tell them I had dental work. In those days, I had a lot of dental work. I had a root canal yesterday. I actually had one yesterday. I had about 200 of them in the 90s that would never actually happen, you know. But I thought about it. What was I experiencing? Before I use it and it all starts falling apart, I was feeling great. What was I experiencing? And I realized what I was experiencing was faith. What I was experiencing was faith. And if faith in this poison will do that for me, will put me back into my own body with that level of confidence and comfort, what will faith in a real loving God do for me? A real loving higher power that I can give my life to, and which is what I've done. Which is what, and take it back and do all the stuff we do. But it's been spectacular because I found that faith would serve me in an amazing way. And I have 3 prayers that I live by, and one of them is I say, "Surprise me, God." It implies total trust. I give the reins to my Father totally. Surprise me, God. My second prayer is, lead me where you need me. Lead me where you need me. And that sounds like, oh, well, because I am such of service. No, because what happens is when I'm led to where I'm needed, I find opportunities for all elements of my life, all elements of my life. My third prayer is thank you, Father, because I have to stay in gratitude. I have to stay in gratitude. All I wanted to do when I got sober was be around people in recovery. That's all I wanted to do. So I did something that probably no alcoholic had ever done before. I'm sure I was the first. I went to UCLA and got my certification as a drug and alcohol counselor. Took on a kind of a holy glow, you know. Yeah. And I began to work at a place called the Musician's Assistance Program. And I would walk into a hospital and I'd say, "Hi, my name is Paul. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm your counselor." And they'd go, "No, you're not. You're little Linus from Smokey and the Bandit. It's happening again." I go, No, damn it. Yeah, that was me too. But no, I'm here to. Come touch the hem. I'll save you. Know, just so full of self. Just so full of self. But I was absolutely, it's like I'd found this place where I could be myself and be comfortable, and I wanted to give it away. I wanted to give it to everybody. Early in sobriety, I went to Ireland. I mean, what an amazing, for anybody, talk about the headwaters of the disease, So many alcoholics in so little time, so. I've gone to meetings all over the world, and of course, Dave, I have to tell my alcoholic comment about going to meetings in Ireland. Very dangerous for me because people keep grabbing me going, "Where'd you hide the gold, you little bastard?" You know. So I'm 10 years sober, jumping in, and I've done the work, and I've done the steps, and I've found this amazing gathering to be a part of, and a level of comfort no matter where I go in the world. If just somebody will say something, and they're an alcoholic, and I feel something shift inside me. I feel a level of trust and safety that I just cannot. All of us in this, you are an amazing group of people. You're an amazing, amazing group of people. Let me put it this way. How many of you were, and I stole this, but I love this. How many of you were better listeners, sweeter, more generous, and a better listener, better, nicer guy before you quit drinking and using? Stand up if you were. But this is really nice. How many of you have gone out of your way to help another alcoholic, pick him up in a car? How many of you have prayed for somebody that you just barely met? How many of you have done anything you could to help somebody find this, no matter what time of day or night it was? Stand up if you were one of those people. Look at this. Thank you very much. It's an honor to be a part of. You're amazing. Give yourselves a hand. This is, alcoholics don't fly airplanes into buildings. Alcoholics are the safest, sweetest people I've ever met in my life. You can pick 4 or 5 of us absolute strangers right now, stick us in a car to drive to New York. By the time we made it out of the desert, we'd be, by the time we made it out of the city, we'd be family, absolute family. I was 10 years sober, and I went to Nashville to write some more codependent anthems. Some of them are "Come Touch Me, Let Me Love You" songs, And while I was there, I was asked to speak at the jail, the jail actually. And it's an amazing experience to go and share, at H&I, at hospitals and institutions. So I went to the jail and I spoke, and I shared about the steps and about how we get a little distance from the acts that we're most ashamed of, and when we lose the emotional pull of that, and we can make amends that we couldn't make amends. I was hot at the prison. 10 years sober, and I had spoken at the jail, and I was hot, and I went back to my room, and I was at the hotel I was staying at, and I was like sort of this magical combination of Jiminy Cricket and Gandhi. I was like, just come touch the hem. I was just full. And I went up to my hotel room, and I put my magnetic key in, and the magnetic key didn't work. And it's like, son of a bitch. And I'm on the 9th floor, and the elevators are slow, and the thing has worked for 3 days. And it's a quick trip from Gandhi to Himmler for me. I just, I'm back to. And so I go downstairs to get a new key, but I go to the desk. And the lobby is packed with guys. They've all got badges on, And I go up to the desk, but I'm nice because I learned restraint of pen and tongue in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and by working with a great sponsor, a couple great sponsors, including Mac M now. So I go up to the guy and I say, I don't know why. I don't know what God has for me in mind to be in this lobby 3 nights in a row, but I do need another key that actually works. At which point I feel a tap on my shoulder. And I turn around, and there's a guy there with one of these badges on. And it's it's a convention of talent buyers, guys that book talent for fairs and performing arts centers and stuff like that. So this guy taps me on the shoulder. I turn around and it says, Gary from Oklahoma City. He said, I just wanted to say hi. I booked you a few years ago. I just wanted to say hi. And I went, Oklahoma City? Oh, Jesus. Are you the guy when I... Lick me, when I did my Linda Blair? He went, that was me. And I went, well, I'm 10 years sober now, and blah, blah, I went to UCLA, I'm blah, real active with the program, and blah, blah, speak a lot, blah, 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 Polly this, Polly that, me. And he said, yeah, I heard in the rooms you were sober. And and I went, wow, I just met him, and I turned him into an alcoholic, I said, you too? Yeah, well, when did that happen? And he reached in his pocket, and he pulled out a chip for 17 years. And I did the math. And I went, oh, my God, you were 7 years sober when that happened. He said, that's right. I went, oh, my God. Tell me about it. He said, Paulie, you were so sick. I've never been so scared for another human being. I thought you were dying. I said, what'd you do? He said, I called my sponsor. Yeah. I said, of course you called your sponsor. I said, what did your sponsor tell you to do? He said, I'll tell you exactly what we did on the spot. We got together a prayer circle of alcoholics in Oklahoma City, and we prayed for you. We prayed that either in or out of the rooms, because there's a lot of ways to do this, he said. We prayed that in or out of the rooms, you would find relief from your addiction. And 2 weeks later, in a blackout, I called a doctor. And at that moment, I had there are a couple spiritual awakenings for me along the way. I talk about that moment with the third step prayer. Bill W.'s amazing white light experience at the very beginning of his recovery is not something I experienced. But at 10 years, at that moment, I realized that this was all a gift, that I haven't worked for anything. And there was a part of me, and my wife has always said that I will, she's going to put solid gift on my head, stone when I die, because I'm always saying that it's all a gift. How you doing, Paulie? It's all a gift. But I think that up until that point, when I met Gary again and I found out about that prayer circle, I think there was part of me that felt like I'd worked for it. You know what? I speak when I'm asked to speak. I sponsor guys. I've done the steps. I show up when I say I'm going to show up. I'm a good guy. Deep down inside, I'm a good guy, and I earned this. And at that moment, I realized I hadn't earned anything. At that moment, I realized that this is absolutely all a gift. It's all a gift. And it's great because it relieves me of an amazing responsibility. The get Paulie sober and keep Paulie sober job is not my job. My job is to do what is asked of me, to follow these simple steps, you know, and to stay grateful for this amazing life, you know. It's beyond anything that I could have imagined. 20 years, and I want another 30. I mean, first of all, I want to live to 100, and I want 3 dates on my headstone. I want September 19th, 1940. I want March 15th, 1990, and then whenever the hell up there it's going to be, you know, obviously 2040. I can do math. Just because I had to ask about the circle doesn't mean I can't do math. I met my wife, and she loves AA. She loves AA as I do. We both have 2 grown children that are doing great. My kids did a great job of raising me, considering, you know. And the life that we have today is something that I would never would have imagined. I walked into her place the first time, and I saw something on the mantle that she'd cut out of, I think, a Christmas card. And she cut it out and she framed it. And I thought, you know, it's an amazing example of how we live our lives, I think, in Alcoholics Anonymous. And the saying that she had on her mantle, which nobody in her family had ever noticed before, that I noticed right away, hooray for me, it said, care deeply, give freely, think kindly, act gently, and be at peace with the world. And I think I'm going to care deeply, give freely, think kindly, act gently, and be at peace with the world is an amazing way to live. And I have a level of peace in my life right now that I couldn't have imagined before. I wish I could bottle this and give it to everybody, but I can't. The only thing I can do is stay grateful for the life you've given me. And thanks for asking me to come to the powwow. It's really wonderful to be here. Thank you, everybody.
Russell, I need to hear your message, man. I need to hear it.
Thank you so much.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with, and it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs, long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down. And then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right, but I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.